Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar this morning. I'm Susie. I'm the Head of Marketing here at Daydot. It's a beautiful sunny day today, so we will crack straight on and hopefully you can pop out for lunch and enjoy the sunshine. We'll be talking today about making the most out of your marketing budget in 2022, specifically in terms of customer research and media performance. So I'm going to do a very quick reminder. The session is going to be recorded and will be available to watch on our website. Please ask questions in the Q&A on Zoom, and just watch out later. We'll be emailing a short survey to you, and it'd be really helpful if you can just spend a couple of minutes answering 2 or 3 questions, in particular your ideas for future topics, so we can make sure these webinars are as relevant and useful to you as possible. So just a quick intro to Daydot for those of you who haven't attended one of our webinars before. We deliver data-driven website optimization that's proven to increase acquisition performance and grow customer lifetime value. So what does this mean? We basically help brands stay ahead of customer expectations. So we have a research team to identify customer needs, optimization managers, designers and developers in-house who can plan and launch tests centered around the insights to test and learn and optimize your website. And this circle of continuous optimization then builds enhanced long-term engagement and increased customer lifetime value. So very simply, we discover opportunity, understand your customers, and create digital experiences that unleash growth. So I won't dwell on this too much, but these are a couple of our starter packages. This gives you an idea of the price points and the different things that we do. So the first there on the left is a quick fix audit where we'll review your site and make recommendations. And the second one on the right is a proof of concept test. So if you've never tested before, we do everything in-house and find the most compelling tests that will hopefully achieve the best results so that it can help you build a business case for the future. Okay, so to introduce our speakers, today we're going to be hearing from Osh, our MD, and Nick Gassman, who is our Senior Research Manager. I hope you find the talks interesting. First up, we're going to have Nick. So over to you, Nick.
Thank you, Susie. The picture was taken a few years ago, so don't hold it against me. I don't think I'm ever going to quite get used to the business of giving presentations where I can't see the audience. It just feels slightly weird, but there we go. But I hope you find it useful and interesting. So briefly, what I'm going to talk to you about is just a brief introduction to what research overall can do for you. And then if you are used to working with the numbers, with the analytics, how research can fit in, and also a couple of stories about starting actually with the research where numbers aren't giving you much of an insight. And then there's just a little bit of in finally. But so whilst I'm talking about the research, the main headline I think to take away is that it's not either or with the analytics, but research and analytics really do inform each other. And that's really underlined. I've just picked out 4 headlines about what research can do for you. And the analytics that you may be looking at in your day-to-day jobs absolutely tells you what people are doing, but it doesn't tell you why. So when you then have to sit down and figure out, okay, I can see there's a drop off or people are going down this path, you have to start guessing unless you're doing some research as to why that's happening. It can also then, if you're doing A/B testing, the research can help to de-risk those, because otherwise you'll be sitting around the conference room table having a bit of a debate, a bit of an argument about what to test. And the real risk is that you're just going to test 2 poor options. And an A/B test will tell you which is the least worst. But what you won't know is whether it, with even maybe just a small tweak to the design, maybe you could have had a huge improvement that you don't know about. It can also help with informing you about issues with the site that the analytics can't tell you about. And I'll show you an example of that shortly. And then finally, I've picked out just understanding who your customers are. You can get psychological profiles and demographics and all manner of useful insights to help your understanding, which helps you design your website and adjust your wording. And we'll cover those issues. And so I think this is kind of like an interesting way of putting it. And I liken it sometimes to, like, if you're buying somebody a present and you buy them a present, and sometimes you buy people presents that you like, not necessarily a present that they would like. And so it's disappointing if you get all excited about your present that you give to somebody and then you find out actually they don't really like it. It wasn't what they wanted, but you never asked them. So, you know, and clearly if you ask people, then it's not a surprise, but that's where the analogy falls down. But the point is that you are not your customer, and so it's only really by talking to customers and asking them that you can really understand what's going to work in order for you to achieve your business goals. So the story that I want to tell, I'm hoping, is your story. I'm imagining that some of you at least will be product owners or people you may have responsibility for acquisition or retention on your site. And at the very least, you're interested in improving the business performance. And so, as I said, the first section, I'm just going to assume that you're starting with some numbers. And starting with the numbers generally means some sort of analytics package like Google Analytics. And you'll be working with a display, something like the one on the right here. And that breaks down into understanding that you have, you know, where are your site visitors coming from? And you can find that out. And you might find that of 100 people who come to your landing page, that 50 leave straight away. And of the other 50 who go onto your product page, of those, 30 of those disappear straight away. And of those 20 left who go into the checkout, actually 18 don't finish the checkout. So this is where the analytics tells you what's happening, but not why. So if your boss is saying to you, right, improve our conversion rate here, and you're looking at this and you're scratching your head. So you'll then say, right, we need a meeting, and you get everybody into a conference room and you get the screenshots and you go through these pages. And the thing is with this type of stuff is that everyone's got an opinion. And some people shout louder than others, and some people are paid more than others. But that doesn't necessarily mean that their opinion is any more particularly valid. And not only have they got an opinion about what the actual problem is, but they've got an opinion about how to fix it. And so there are some people shouting, look, I keep telling you, we need to change the words on the landing page. And then somebody else shouts out, no, we need more pictures on the product. And no, we need to make the delivery costs clearer on checkout. They might all be right and they might all be wrong. And even if they're all right, you don't know necessarily which, where is the sense of priority? How do you get a handle on if they are all right and we've got 50 ideas for A/B tests? How on earth do we decide which ones to do? Because we can't do them all at the same time. And, clearly there are some measures you can take. If a given test worked and you had a 10% success rate, that would give you the biggest bang for your buck, but you don't necessarily have a handle on whether that's going to work or not. And so the bright idea is, hey, I've got a good idea. Why not let's go and ask the customers and see if they can help out? And so I've got some examples here just to talk you through. And the first one is from some work we did with the Wall Street Journal. And so when you sign up for the Wall Street Journal, and in fact, many publications, they've got something called an onboarding flow, a bit like joining a new company, and there's the onboarding process. And the onboarding flow is all about telling people who've just signed up what they can get from you and how to make the most of it. And from the point of view of the business, you learn something about that customer so that you can hopefully tailor the experience to make it more valuable for them. And then that will increase your retention. And so we did some research on the existing onboarding flow for Wall Street Journal. And these are the headline objectives for that research. And the research, so the research that we did was some remote testing in which actually non-subscribers, but people who are in the right target market who were similar to actual Wall Street Journal users, readers, were recruited and went through the stages of the onboarding flow. And they talked about their experience. They were asked questions as they were going through it in line with the objectives of the research. And so, yeah, we found out it was too long. The whole process was too long, a bit confusing. And some of the steps said things like, hey, go off, branch off here and have a look at the podcasts we've got, or branch off here and have a look at some of the articles from your favorite writers. And so it was really difficult, people were finding, actually, to get to the end, and most people didn't. And those who did, and were really doing so in the expectation that it would subsequently result in a tailored experience for them, which certainly at the time actually was largely not true. And overall, the impact was that, as it says here, that people started to get a poor impression of the Wall Street Journal. Hey, I've signed up for this paper that I'm really interested in, but now I'm in. They're just making things really hard for me. So it's not only the actual usability and being able to achieve ends that you can uncover with the research here, but also the attitude and potential reputational impact. And so one of the things that we tried out as an A/B test was to introduce a new, and we called them cards. So each step in the process was called a card. And so at the very start of it, there was a new card that just asked them in general what sorts of things that they were interested in, which then resulted in tailoring the subsequent flow. And as you can see there, that did result in an increase in the actions taken, but more pertinently, to use a long word, there's that 1.4% increase in long-term engagement. We did run a number of other tests as well, and I'm not going to go through them all, but just picking up on the issues that were identified in the research and progressively going through them over time and making some changes. So this is where doing the research is telling you why people are doing things, so why they're dropping out, and can inform the A/B test. So it's taking away that guessing and the assumptions and saying, well, our customers are actually telling us there are these problems, and we can go through them over time and try and fix them and use A/B testing to actually prove that it works. And so that 18% increase in retention, I think, is a fairly significant number. So moving on to Cylance. Cylance are a antivirus company owned by BlackBerry. And they did have, and we worked with them on their consumer product, which they've now sadly discontinued, despite the enormous amounts of money we could have made for them. However, the numbers for Cylance were not terribly encouraging when they engaged us. And they had Facebook and Google profiles of customers coming to the site, but they didn't really know why they weren't getting the levels of conversion that they had expected. And so we ran some surveys and also did some interviews with their customers and identified two key audiences of gamers and tech experts. And so on the right here, we've got something that's called a limbic map. It's a method, it's one of many methods in which you can plot psychological dimensions and to help you draw up profiles of different customer types. And the profiles on the limbic map of those gamers and tech experts identified them as being positioned towards the right on this map. And looking at the designs, and if you then take these type of profiles to designers and say, I want someone who's driven, my customers are driven more by balance or by dominance, then they can kind of translate that into designs, both visual design and also the wording that you use. So we moved the design of the site to better match the profile of the people who were the target audience. And so on the right here at the top, that's just an example of the old design, and below that was the new design. But we didn't just do that and say, right, okay, we've got a new site and we're using new words. It must be brilliant, so let's go and do that. Before it was released, we did some further user testing to see if it did resonate with the audience and made some adjustments along the way. So again, it's just about de-risking and making sure that your guesses are going, in fact, in the right direction. And the result of that was, again, some reasonably impressive numbers across the board on some of their key metrics. So moving on to the second section, this is times when you're not necessarily looking at your numbers and saying, gosh, what does all of this mean? But there are maybe some questions that are being asked that the numbers just haven't got really much to say about. And so again, my first example is from the Wall Street Journal, where they had these things that they called flexicals. And so in the middle of their articles about financial markets, they had a design here where they had shading over some terms and a learn more. And in fact, if you clicked on either one, they would both give you an expanded section with either explaining the terms or giving you a bit of extra background if you weren't completely familiar with what the article was talking about. So we did some research to try and find out what their readers thought of all of this, and did they find it useful. And what we found was that quite often, many people actually just didn't see them. They didn't, in terms of visual design, they just didn't stand out enough. And even people who did see them didn't necessarily know whether they were clickable or what it would give them if they did. So, when I was interviewing their readers, I'd say, so if you clicked on that, what do you think would happen? and some of them would just sort of frown. Well, I don't know if it would explain what money market funds is, or if it would take me somewhere else, or I'm not sure. And the sort of interesting insight that you get in terms of the design is that comment from one of the interviews where somebody said, "Oh, I wondered if that was me that had done that, and if I'd accidentally dragged my mouse over the words and highlighted it." And for the learn mores, it was more visible. More people spotted that design, but it still wasn't entirely clear what it was going to give. And again, the interesting comment that somebody said was, "I thought it looked like an ad." So there's so this type of research gives you the opportunity to discover things, as I say, make no apologies for the repetition, that the numbers aren't going to tell you about people's or customers' attitudes towards things, and give you those clues as to what you need to do in order to fix it. And just as this is a screen grab from an interview. So this is how we conduct remote interviews. And this window down the bottom that I've grayed out is actually the picture of the person that I was talking to at the time. And we record the interviews so that our clients can actually see the whole interview for themselves if they wish. And I take little clips to illustrate some of the key points. And this is actually a really useful example where the person I was interviewing was saying, it would be really useful if I could just click on something to explain some of this stuff. And that was before this person realized that they actually could, but they hadn't spotted it. So it showed that there was as well some demand for the capability. It was just the way it was implemented. So moving on to the RSPB, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, that's the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds. And on the homepage of the shop, so there's a sub-site specifically for the shop site, and it's the shop that we're working with, the people who run the shop. And so this is the RSPB shop homepage. And this is a screen grab of what's called a heat map that shows how far people scroll down on the page. And in the middle of the page, there is this panel, which is effectively their value proposition. Why should you buy from the RSPB? And the heat map was showing that only 15% of visitors scroll down that far. And what RSPB were interested in was, is this, for the people who do get there, is it actually of any interest? Is it using the right words? Is it saying the right things? Does it actually encourage people to shop from us and to come back? So we did some research and we ran surveys and interviews. And for the surveys, we were, there were a couple of surveys with the questions that you can see here on the slide. And we were looking for the, so what we weren't doing here is saying, hey, look, here's a panel, what do you think of it? We're kind of coming up to it sideways and looking at the words that people were using and whether the reasons that they gave did in fact reflect that existing value proposition panel. And we also did some desk research looking at where people are talking about the RSPB shop on other websites, as well as the product reviews on the site itself. And we did some interviews with their customers, in which we did actually, as well as asking them these more general questions, we also directly showed them the panel. and got their response to it. And we got some really interesting findings from it. So there are a couple of things. One was that the panel, the message did resonate with customers. People said, yep, that's good stuff. That's kind of what I'd expect. But it had, and it's always easy with the benefit of hindsight to say it had more impact on new customers, because their existing customers kind of have got used to it and know that, and that's what they'd expect. And it's the new customers for whom it would have a bigger impact. So then you immediately start thinking, okay, so where are the user journeys for new customers where I could display some of this stuff to encourage them to purchase from us? And also, again, in terms of looking at the language that was used, two types of customers. One, the internally motivated, I do it because I like seeing the birds, and the other one is I do it because the birds like it. And so internal and external motivation. And again, so we're still doing more work at the moment with RSPB to see how we can adapt the language that they use across the website, the language that they use in their product descriptions to incorporate the way that their customers are thinking. And this was an example of one test that we did do on their basket page, where on the checkout, where we took 3 of the statements and positioned those statements here, and everybody in the experimental group did see this, whether they were new customers or not. And it did result in additional 3% checkouts, which is really good news. And part of the research, again, having said that it has most impact on new customers, the research showed that whilst there was that impact, nevertheless, for existing customers, they just ignored it. It didn't put them off. It didn't have any negative impact on them, but it had a positive impact on new customers. So and finally, I've talked about a few examples of different methods of doing research, but there are quite a number of different methods that you can use depending upon a number of factors of what it is you want to find out, what your budget is, access to customers, etc., etc. And there are various ways of plotting those out. And I've got a couple of dimensions here. There's another one where you can think about whether the research is attitudinal or behavioral, and there's even formative and summative. But the happy thing for you is you don't need to worry about the dimensions, because we look after all of that for you. If we work with you, then we just talk about what it is that you want to know, what your objectives are, and then we'll help you through the minefield of which are the appropriate methods to use. And a fairly obvious question then, if you're not currently doing the research, is this going to cost me an arm and a leg? And so up front, Susie showed you a couple of our starter packages, but you can even start on some of this yourself. And there are some free tools out there where you can do some free surveys. You can go down to local coffee shop and ask people some questions about your business. And there are pros and cons for all of that, and some detail to work through. And then, of course, the more large scale, the more in depth you go, then the costs obviously increase. But so that's it from me, and I'm going to hand over to Wash, and hope you found that useful.
Great stuff. Thanks, Nick. So following from Nick quite neatly, really, he's looking at Nick's kind of informed us how to better understand your customers to make sure that your product and your marketing is fit for purpose and is based around the kind of wants and needs of your customers. What I want to talk to you a little bit is about how we can look at using some of that kind of secret sauce to deliver acquisition growth in a world where more frequently we're seeing increases in budget being harder and harder to come by. So the second. There we go. So in 2021, marketing budgets dropped by around 40%. So this is data from Gartner, actually. So marketing budgets overall sort of plummeted to around 6.4% of overall company revenue in 2021, and they're not expected to go back up to pre-2020 levels this year or next. So what does that mean? It means that there's an even bigger emphasis on return on ad spend to make marketing budget work harder for you, and to make every pound or dollar that you're spending go further. Return on ad spend is determined by dividing the total revenue produced by your ads by the cost of those ads. So if revenue increases but ad spend remains the same, your return on ad spend will grow. It's a simple concept, but it's one that a lot of businesses are looking at more and more as a way of getting more sort of bang for their buck. But that being said, that efficiency versus growth is often seen by many as kind of a zero-sum game. How can we be efficient but still grow? And there's a lot of stuff that we can start to do. We'll look at that later to make your ads and your entire sort of marketing funnel more efficient, but also optimize experiences and make the most out of every click, out of every customer that comes to your funnel. So we start off with your efficient frontier. I mean, most of you guys would have heard of this in some form or another, but it's really the area where your return on ad spend is not prohibitively impacted by increased spend. So if you spend outside of this zone, you're going to start to lose money, and no finance director is going to sign off on budget which is guaranteed to lose money. You can have the most targeted, relevant, and efficient media buying setup in the world, but if your visitors' expectations are only being met until the moment they land on your site, then it's all for nothing. So what I kind of mean by this is how long do we spend optimizing our optimizing, testing, learning, experimenting with ads, creative, ad copy, audiences, etc. Imagine if you spent a fraction of that time doing the same where money changes hands. And that's really where we're going to be focusing on today. I should point out, Morpheus never actually said this, but I absolutely love these memes. So, right, imagine, what if I told you I could increase conversion rate and average order value by 50%? It sounds nuts, but that's something that regularly happens for a number of our clients year on year. How do we do that? That's a great question, I ask myself. So you're really looking at that kind of an optimization and experimentation program can look to then pull in your paid media, organic, CRM, social, all different types of traffic. And investing in that optimization and experimentation program doesn't just superpower your ad campaigns, it helps to make the most out of all your site traffic. And not only that, it starts to create a sort of a strong baseline of conversion throughout your funnel, all the way from conversion through to kind of onboarding, engagement, and churn prevention. So this, the stuff that we're talking about today, it can be applied throughout the entire user journey. So how do we go about creating a research and data-driven testing and optimization program, which drives constant year-on-year growth and pays for itself to the tune of around sort of 300% ROI? Well, as Nick kindly pointed out, there's kind of what we think users are doing, and then there's what users are actually doing. And it's really, it's understanding the analytics, which we often dive into every day. It tells you half the story. It doesn't tell you why your customers are behaving the way they do. And often, what we start to do is when you're leveraging both data and research insights, you can start to overrule the hippos, the highest paid person's opinion, which is often what's kind of driving a lot of optimization, a lot of decision making around marketing direction and budgets. So how can we use this? One of the most, kind of the earliest sort of stages when we're working with clients to help them, shave off the edges is looking at something what you call friction. So friction is anything which prevents your customers from completing a desired action. So on the right, you can see a number of different kind of areas. This is from 2020, I think, of why are customers leaving e-commerce sites without buying anything. There's a lot of stuff there. A lot of the stuff is known. It's a known quantity, but how do we deal with that? So we're looking at stuff like information architecture and navigation, poor search visibility, unclear calls to action, unexpected or unclear products and pricing, complex checkout, lack of trust or social proof. A lot of these things we need to start to deal with and understand, so that we can prevent users from leaving without purchasing, and increasing some of those core kind of measures like dwell time, engagement, and start to see conversion uplift. The second kind of area is obviously landing pages. This is kind of an area where a good landing page is simply something which clearly provides what your customers are looking for and handles their immediate objections and creates a smooth path to checkout. That's it, really. I mean, we overcomplicate these things, and often as product owners, we are so close to our products, to our pricing, to our business, that there's a lot of kind of cognitive gaps, where for users, particularly new users, they're coming to your site and I don't understand that. You're not giving me what I need to understand. You're not, the value proposition's maybe not there. It's not quite clear whether this product is the right one for me. I've got anxiety. I've got some concerns which aren't being addressed. All of those sort of things is, and the understanding of of how to deal with those points really kind of drive from Nick and the sort of work Nick does on the research side of things to kind of validate the data that we're seeing from analytics. So we can see there's a drop off here. We can see that this form fields are only being half completed. What's causing that and what's driving that? And we can only really start to work on that and fix that through testing or experimentation or validation through research once we better understand customer mindset. And then looking at basket checkout. So while checkout tech stacks are often prevent the level of kind of sophisticated checkout experience that most customers expect, there's still a whole world of changes that we can make to improve improve and superpower your checkout and make it a better experience, which reinforces the work that you've done from that initial kind of ad impression through to landing page, all the way through that journey. So this is looking at stuff like reinforcing value proposition. So, how many times have you added something to basket, got to checkout, and all of the good stuff that made you want to add it to the basket has disappeared? And, this is especially prevalent for a new product or an impulse purchase. You're going to, sitting there and, what are some of the things that we can add to that basket and checkout experience to improve the likelihood that someone's going to convert? So again, looking at value proposition, tackling overlong payment funnels, creating simplicity. I mean, that's kind of the overarching theme here, isn't it? Making everything as simple as possible. Reducing friction and signposting kind of UX banana skins. So all of this is kind of classic optimization opportunities. And like with the other kind of areas, it sits very heavily in kind of data and user research to find the right answer. So rather than kind of figure in the air or kind of hippo, we're making decisions based on data and insights. So question for you, so what would a 14% increase in conversion rate mean to your business? It means quite a great deal, right? Likewise, what would you do if you could say in your current sales run rate, but spend just 80% of your current budget? So these are kind of questions that we often help our clients kind of answer is through experimentation and testing. By increasing the performance of your on-site assets, we can then almost kind of superpower and amplify the performance of your marketing spend. So here's an opportunity that we did something very similar that we did for Shelter quite recently. So each year, Shelter helps millions of people struggling with bad housing or homelessness through expert advice, support, and legal services. So digital is a huge channel for them from a fundraising point of view. But what they've been noticing year on year is they're getting less bang for their buck. So they're starting to reach that kind of that point of diminishing returns from the marketing spend. So, you know, their question to us is, what do we do now? And the answer is, really, okay, well, we need to then look at, okay, you've optimized the hell out of your marketing funnel. What do we do once people land on the page? And, you know, a lot of the things that we're looking at is, are people coming to Shelter because they want to donate to Shelter specifically, or because they want to donate and they have that's, you know, looking at what's their motivation for doing so. Is the experience one which is suited to someone who already knows the brand, or to someone who is coming in fresh? How does that differ based on traffic? So what we did, we ran a number of different kind of research methodologies and data analysis to kind of figure out some of those questions. So we use Session Cam, which is a sort of session recording and a heat mapping tool to kind of track visitors' interaction with landing pages, checkout, paying close attention to their form fields performance. We recruited 10 testers and started running remote usability. So, you know, filming and recording the way people interacted with the site when they're trying to perform certain actions. In this case, it was trying to donate, asking them in real time, what's preventing you from doing this? What don't you understand? What's good? What's bad? What's not working? What's kind of missing? And trying to identify those motivational points, the gaps in content, what's kind of missing, what anxieties are not being dealt with. And we then looked at sort of supplementing a lot of that with analytics data, kind of looking at where the drop-offs were, overlaying those with the research that we've done to get a better understanding of where the focus should be. And finally doing a heuristic or kind of best practice analysis, which is one of our consultants going through that flow and kind of just looking at, this is the stuff that these are kind of the threads that we often pull on. We can see this is not working. That's backed up by data, and that resulted in a report which we shared with the team at Shelter, and the output of that was really kind of 20 actionable insights around bugs, quick fixes, and these were all implemented by the Shelter team. And I think that that's something that was a real issue with them, is that they wanted to have something that they could do themselves. They're really hot on having internal teams and internal capabilities to be able to deliver things. So we were able to provide them with an actionable report of stuff that they can fix immediately. And once implemented, they saw a 14% uplift in donations, a 12% uplift in earnings per click, and 81% growth in return on ad spend, just from making those small changes. And a lot of the stuff that we showed them, they kind of had an awareness that might be what was breaking some of their conversion flows, but they couldn't prove it. And a lot more stuff was just entirely new to them. They'd never even considered it. And that's what I was talking about, is being, when you're so close to your product and to your business that you don't necessarily see where the gaps are. So that's kind of the output of one of the audits that Susie mentioned earlier on. So what are the first kind of steps to making an efficient optimization program to really maximize your marketing spend and drive real growth in your core conversion KPIs? So it's probably worth talking about conversion rate. It's a moving average. It's never kind of a binary thing, right? So an optimization program won't single-handedly cure your conversion rate issues, because there's so many variables. You could be testing out a new traffic source. You might get an affiliate who sent through 30,000 clicks, because they do that. There's so many variables. What conversion optimization can do is start to provide growth in core KPIs. So that's average order value, conversion rate, return on ad spend, engagement, trial activation, churn prevention, and ultimately customer lifetime value, because we scale the learnings, the approach, the frameworks and methodologies that we use across that entire customer journey. I think also it mitigates the effect of changing sort of media mix and quality, which is super important. And it's but it's like I said earlier, it's about giving you a baseline of what's of how, if we do nothing else, we will see growth. If we continue to test in lots of different areas, we'll maintain that baseline that we know and understand, and it kind of stops variable results. So just to kind of fall back on what Susie mentioned, we've got a number of different packages that can kind of start you off on that journey. You've got a quick fixes audit, which is kind of a micro version of what we did for Shelter, and the second piece is around proof of concept. So for a lot of businesses, the comment is, we'd love to do this. I don't know how to get a budget because it doesn't have a CVA attached to it. So we can help you to identify and run that first test, demonstrate 200 to 300% return on investment on that one test, and start to build a business case for how to implement and run testing and optimization, whether that be in-house or whether that be something that we'll step in and run for you. And I think that's it for me. So any questions?
Sash and Nick, that was really, really interesting. I hope everybody attending found it interesting. There's lots of insights there, what you could do from a research perspective and also optimization, which is great. So we do have a couple of questions. So Osh, the first one I think is related to a couple of slides back where you were talking about conversion rate being a moving average. And someone's asking, so will they definitely see a conversion rate year-on-year growth, or is there a chance they won't if they were doing optimization?
Okay, that's a really good question. And so I think that there's a misconception that when you have a conversion rate optimization program, and that's often why they're called something else, right? But if it's strictly a conversion rate optimization program, the results of each test, if you've done the groundwork properly, should give you between 3 and a 5% uplift in conversion. And that is then, once that's implemented, you can see that change. That's going to make a difference. If everything remains static and you didn't make any other changes to any of your marketing mix, then you would see that uplift. But that's what but there is no year on year, you will see conversion rate uplift change. That's absolute. But will you see this test has resulted in this? No, because you're changing everything else. So you're constantly changing your mix. You're constantly changing the different elements within the funnel. You're constantly changing pricing, product. So there's so much going on. But what conversion rate optimization can do is start to give you a steady baseline of improvement, rather than kind of erratic drops. And as marketers, constantly, we saw a huge drop over the weekend. Why is that? I don't know. I've got no idea. It can start to blend those out. Just by providing a more coherent and kind of sustainable uplift from that experience. And I think what Nick mentioned about de-risking experimentation is really huge, and that's a big point. Is by fully understanding your customers and the data behind their decision making, then you can start to create experiences which are going to drive growth, and as a byproduct of that, greatly enhance your media performance.
Great. Another one, can you use the learnings from optimization to create better ads? So feeding it back in?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that we see quite a lot, is that the understandings that we get from the work that we do is understanding what are some of the objections that customers have, what are some of the anxieties, what are their motivations, what sort of things, what is the value proposition of your product. A lot of that can be translated directly back into ads and creative. Is making more compelling ads, driving click-through rate gains, and making a coherent kind of end-to-end experience.
Great. And then I've just one last one for you, Nick. Someone has asked, how can I make the case to persuade my boss it's worth investing in research if they think they already get enough from the analytics?
As Osh said, good question. I guess the answer is going to depend to a degree on the context. So what is the objection? Is it, it might be that you just don't have any money, but then I'd be saying if you don't have any money this year, then see what you can be putting in place so you can be talking about budgets for next year to make a provision for that. And sometimes it's just that you've got somebody holding the purse strings who, I think as the question implies, says, look, we've got all the analytics. That's telling us all we need to know. Why, I can't see what the research is going to give us. I don't see any point. And you might even be having a conversation with that budget holder saying, look at this stuff on the page. I don't think it makes sense to our customers. And that budget holder said, well, it makes perfect sense to me. And sometimes you even get the reply, I'm in the target market. So it makes perfect sense to me. And Osh was talking about, sometimes you can be so close to your own product. And it's absolutely true that I've done research in the past where I've taken the results back to the organization and said, look, your customers don't understand these words. And everyone's absolutely amazed because to them, it's just so obvious. So so how do you actually, get that started? How do you start the ball rolling? So one thing you can do, as I said, there are free tools out there. Can you do a little survey yourself? Can you just use some free tools and get a survey put on your website? And what I'd say, if you're doing that, then as far as you can, absolutely engage with your stakeholders in that. Get their buy-in and commitment to that. Say, look, I'm going to spend some of my quote unquote spare time. It's not going to cost us anything. I want to do this survey. Here are the questions that I propose asking. What do you think? Because if you get their buy-in at that point, and then the results come back in a way they don't expect, they can't argue back about, oh, well, I wouldn't have asked that question. So you need their commitment to that. I've found in the past, the actual strongest way of getting people to understand that there's something here that they're not getting is for them to actually see their customers trying to use their website and failing. Now, an ex-colleague of mine in a previous role, he just videoed his granny trying to use a website and took that back, brought that back into the business and showed that to stakeholders. And even just that was enough to get them really thinking about, oh, blimey, well, okay, well, maybe there's something there. So there are things you can do to get started, and I'd say, if you need any help with that, as Osha said, we often, part of what we do is very often helping our immediate stakeholders with our clients make the internal business case. So get in touch, have a chat with us, see if there's something that we can do just to help you get started if you need to get over that initial hump, because quite often there's something that we will be able to do.
Great. And that's a really good note to finish on. So yes, please get in touch, look out for the survey and feedback on this session and what your thoughts were. We really appreciate the feedback ourselves, and we'll see you next time. Have a good day, everybody.